Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another video on my channel Hairliciously. If you guys are new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe so that you guys are updated on hair loss and hair transplant topics, as well as updates on current hair loss treatments in the pipelines. Visit my website at hairliciously.com to purchase your microneedling device, which is scientifically proven to stimulate hair growth, my low-level laser therapy cap, DHT blocking shampoo, conditioner, and serum, hair growth vitamins, and a few other products to help those who are losing hair. So in today's video, I wanted to give you guys another update on Justin Bieber's hair loss now that we've entered well into 2022. And for some reason, there are a lot of people in the hair loss community who are just really fixated on Justin Bieber's hair loss. I guess it's like one of those things where, you know, if a famous male celebrity is losing his hair, we're just so interested in how it's progressing and what they're doing to treat it, if they're on any type of treatment. Because a lot of times, you know, these high-profile individuals will do whatever it takes to revert back to a full head of hair. For example, we have people like Gordon Ramsay, James Franco, Elon Musk, who've all had hair transplants, and there are plenty of other actors who are known to be either taking, you know, Finasteride or Dutasteride. So in the case of Justin Bieber, he's been balding for the past few years now, and I don't know if you guys recall, probably about 10 years ago, in an interview, Justin was basically roasting and mocking Prince William for losing his hair. And he verbatim said that, you know, there are things to prevent hair loss nowadays, like Propecia. I don't know why he doesn't just get on those things, those products. You just take Propecia and your hair grows back. Have you not got it over there? So this interview actually took place back in 2012 when Justin Bieber was about 18 years of age. And as an 18-year-old, you know, he had probably one of the best hairlines that I have ever seen. A very low hairline, very low adolescent hairline, and it wasn't even one of those typical like Nord 1 type of hairlines. His was more like on the feminine side because it was more kind of like roundish on the temples. And back then, you know, nobody had any clue that he would start losing his hair as he entered into you know, his early to mid 20s. And basically, you know, karma bit him in the ass, and he himself was unfortunately afflicted with genetic hair loss. And it was a bit weird, you know, for someone who wasn't balding in his late teens at 18 that he actually knew about Finasteride. He probably wasn't taking it back then simply because he had a full head of hair. And I highly doubt someone his age back then was dealing with benign prostatic hyperplasia, which is another reason why people take Finasteride, but these are usually for older individuals. So it's likely that he learned about Finasteride from potentially from his dad, who was bald, or from other balding people around his circle of friends. Maybe he was doing research on hair loss treatments. I really don't know. But what we do know is that he knew about this treatment that can slow down the progression of hair loss. And anytime somebody actually has knowledge about Finasteride, it probably isn't a good thing, and it probably means that they're also losing hair. Finasteride isn't something your average, you know, non-balding person would know about. And because of Justin Bieber's knowledge of Finasteride, or lack of, you know, apparently about Finasteride early on, it's pretty likely that he is currently taking Finasteride to treat his androgenetic alopecia, and probably had plenty of time to jump on Finasteride on the first onset of his hair loss. In that interview, he obviously made it sound like Finasteride was some sort of like magical pill that would cure and stop hair loss, but we know that it's not that simple. And even for those who are taking 5-alpha reductase inhibitors like Finasteride or Dutasteride, it's not always going to be sufficient to halt hair loss in its tracks. And that's why we see some people who, you know, despite taking hair loss medication, they still lose hair despite being on Finasteride, because, you know, it can only inhibit so much DHT, systemic DHT, and even less for scalp DHT levels. And to make it worse, you also have to consider other endogenous androgens that are produced in the body that can still transcribe, you know, the same effects DHT has on hair follicles, although at a lesser extent based on things like binding affinities, things like, you know, tissue selectivity. So no, Finasteride can slow down hair loss, but it's not going to completely halt hair loss. And for some people, you know, it's not going to be enough to do much, so they're going to have to resort to other types of stronger means of treatments like anti-androgens, androgen receptor antagonists to prevent things like androgens and DHT and you know, other endogenous androgens from binding to the androgen receptors in the hair follicles itself, which, you know, to be honest, is a more direct way to stopping hair loss, all without messing with the hormonal profile and therefore causing unwanted side effects. So just to give you guys a quick comparison on how Justin's hair loss has been progressing, this is his baseline photo at age 18 before he experienced any type of androgenetic alopecia. It's a pretty low and rounded feminine hairline. The hairline placement and his forehead size being less than a third of his face, which is typically considered to be a small forehead. He has really good density here, and this is what we can classify as a true norwood 0. There's absolutely no signs of thinning or hair loss going on. Ideally, in a perfect world, this is the type of hairline that I personally would love to have. But most non-balding people end up with a maturing hairline that typically progresses to like a norwood 1. As they go into adulthood. And the few people that I can think of that have a similar type of hairline is, Ronald Reagan, or maybe even the former Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, who both, they have incredible hairlines, even well into their 50s. But the point being is that Justin Bieber's hairline during his late teens was probably the peak point in terms of, superior density and norwood 0 status. And then fast forward a few years later, we see this Instagram photo that he posted in May of 2021, which depicts him in dreadlocks. It's much more noticeable is the receded hairline and the temples, which he has, which would probably put him around like a norwood 2. So basically, within a span of less than a decade, he had lost ground by about 2 norwood scales. And even earlier, probably around like 2017 or 2018 was when we started noticing his first onset of hair loss. And like I mentioned earlier, having known Finasteride ever since he was at least 18 years of age prior to being inflicted with hair loss, it's very likely that he had hopped on Finasteride on the first onset. I would assume probably in his early 20s when he had noticed about, like a 30 or 40% loss in density. But we actually don't know exactly when. I could be wrong, and he might have jumped on hair loss meds after his hair loss was more noticeable. And it's clear to see that unlike what he expected Finasteride to do to his hair, he actually, assuming that he is taking Finasteride, did not gain the hairs that he had lost. And this is true for most people, who are using Finasteride. It's meant to be used more so to stabilize hair loss than it being used to promote hair growth. Hair growth can definitely happen for certain people, and I've seen some cases where people were able to literally reverse hair loss, but typically the majority of people who are using Finasteride will oftentimes see stabilization, and any growth is seen as an added bonus. Finasteride and dutasteride won't fully block 100% scalp DHT levels, and as a result of this, as well as other circulating and endogenous androgens in the body, they have the potential to further aggravate hair loss. The most recent photos we have of Justin's current hair loss situation was actually a couple weeks ago, dated February 13th in 2022 during the Super Bowl. He was spotted on a double date with his wife Hailey's BFF Kendall Jenner and her boyfriend Devin Booker. This first photo shows Justin sporting a shaved head, and we can definitely see a clear, distinct hair loss pattern going on. The deep temple recession on both sides. He's definitely in the norwood 2, possibly even like a norwood 2.5 range. And scrolling down, we can see a more close-up shot showing his weak hairline. Definitely has receded, and his forehead now looks closer to nearly like 1/2 of the length of his face, as opposed to the 1/3 ratio he used to have before his hair loss. And here's a good side shot of his hairline, and it's clearly creeping towards the norwood 3 range eventually. The hairs on the frontal mid portion also look very weak and thin, and if you guys actually look kind of up close, you can kind of see right through his scalp. And usually what happens in a lot of these cases is that the temples would recede a little bit further, and then the frontal island portion of the hairline would eventually lose ground and advance him to a norwood 3A. And once the crown is afflicted, he would be in the norwood 4 range. But at this point, I don't think his crown area is affected. So first off, for someone who is approaching their 30s in a couple years, his hair loss is relatively moderate. It's not really severe to begin with, and we've seen far worse cases for than his for someone his age. And I think because he is likely taking Finasteride at a minimum, as far as treatments are concerned, to lower his DHT levels, he is probably able to stabilize and slow down the progression of hair loss for now. Now, will Finasteride be enough for Justin Bieber to slow down further progression? It's really hard to say. It might be too early to tell. I don't know if his dad was also taking finasteride, but given his, his family history of hair loss on his dad's side and, with his dad, there is a possibility that even Justin could eventually spiral down to like a Nord 6, Nord 7, just like his dad. But we also don't know if his dad was taking finasteride or not. And if he were, then clearly finasteride wasn't helping in his case. It could be that he was on finasteride and it wasn't simply enough to slow down his progression of hair loss, or perhaps it stopped working after a few years of usage, which can happen to a lot of users, since finasteride will still leave, like I said, a good chunk of scalp and systemic DHT along with other endogenous androgens produced in the body. But at this point, what we do know is that Justin's hair loss seems to have progressed just a little bit. Perhaps it's stable now. I don't think it has deviated too much from his older photos in 2021. But then again, it can accelerate just as quickly, and the Nord Reaper can push him further down the Nord chart. But for someone, like his case, I personally think he probably would be better off getting a hair transplant to fix his hairline, which is one of the fastest ways to restore it and add in more density, assuming that he is taking finasteride and that it is slowing down and stabilizing from further progression of hair loss. He has all the money in the world, and with some of the best doctors where he's located in Los Angeles that work on celebrity hair transplants, it's just a matter of time before he can go back to his Nord 1 status. It'll definitely take years off of his appearance, and given his celebrity status and always kind of like being put on the spotlight, getting his hairline restored definitely wouldn't hurt in the long run. It's pretty clear that he obviously hasn't gone through any hair restoration work, and maybe he's just happy with how his hair is looking, and if things don't progress further from where it's currently at. He's clearly aware that he's balding as he's shaved his hair down, exposing his receding temples and hairline. Maybe he really just doesn't care at all, or maybe he'll just continue to shave it off if it gets to the point where he's just losing too much hair. I really don't know at this point, and there is a possibility that despite his knowledge in finasteride, he simply isn't taking it at all and just letting nature take its course. He's never ever disclosed that he's taking it or isn't taking finasteride, so we'll see what happens later down the road. But the good thing is that his hair loss is typical for most people who are losing hair in their 20s and 30s. His hair loss also seems to just be situated kind of like on the hairline without any infiltration to the crown area or the mid scalp, which means it's going to be easier for him to treat as long as he's on meds or jumps on meds before it progresses further and it gets more difficult to treat. And what's even better is that there are, incredible treatments out there that can help stabilize and even halt and reverse, hair loss. Through a combination of hair transplants and hair loss medications. We have 5-alpha reductase inhibitors, growth stimulants, microneedling, anti-androgens currently being researched for FDA approval, CV0301. We also have ones that are used for research purposes that have shown benefits for certain individuals. RU5841, we have SARMs, and at the end of the day, it really comes down to if you're willing to go the pharmacological route or go with a hair transplant, and that's totally fine. We have our own risk tolerances, and ultimately, you guys are going to be the ones who are going to have to make that decision. But it's good to know and sure that there are different options available for those who want to salvage their hair. It's also totally fine if you just want to shave it off, and people like Bald Cafe, they seem fine with a bald head of hair. Just go ahead and just grow a beard. But that wraps up this video, guys. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns. Let me know your thoughts on Justin Bieber's hair loss and what you believe his treatment protocol is currently. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up, and I will talk to you guys in my next video. Take care.